The call came at exactly 3:33 a.m. Michael Harris wasn't asleep. Working 12-hour night shifts as a 911 dispatcher had destroyed any normal relationship with time years ago. Even on his days off, he found himself awake when the rest of the town slept. His apartment overlooked a quiet street in Portland, Maine. Outside, rain slid slowly down the windows while distant traffic hummed somewhere beyond the harbor. The television played quietly in the background without sound. Michael scrolled through news headlines on his phone when the screen suddenly went black. For several seconds it remained completely dark. Then it lit up. Unknown caller. He frowned. No number. No location. No emergency identifier. Just those two words. Normally he ignored unknown calls at that hour. Something made him hesitate. The phone continued vibrating. Once. Twice. 3 times. The clock beside his couch changed from 3:32 to 3:33. Michael answered. Silence. Not ordinary silence. It sounded as though the connection existed inside an enormous empty room. No static. No breathing. Nothing. He almost ended the call. Then. Someone quietly spoke his name. Michael. The voice belonged to neither a man nor a woman. Young. Old. Close. Far away. It carried no emotion. No threat. No urgency. It simply knew who he was. The line disconnected immediately. Call duration. 0:04. Michael stared at the screen. Unknown number. No callback option. No record besides the 4-second connection. He laughed quietly. Probably another internet routing error. It happened. Rarely. But it happened. Still. Something about the voice refused to leave his mind. It hadn't asked for help. Hadn't threatened him. Hadn't even finished a sentence. Only his name. He set the phone aside and tried returning to the news. 10 minutes later he realized he hadn't read a single word. The next morning the rain had stopped. Gray clouds drifted over the city as Michael prepared coffee before another overnight shift. From the kitchen window he noticed someone standing across the street. A man. Long gray overcoat. Dark hat. Hands folded behind his back. Perfectly still. He appeared to be watching Michael's apartment. Not unusual. People waited for buses there every morning. Except. There wasn't a bus stop. Michael frowned. The man hadn't moved once during the 5 minutes it took the coffee machine to finish brewing. No phone. No cigarette. No shifting weight. Nothing. Just standing. Watching. Michael carried his mug to the front door. The moment he stepped outside. The sidewalk was empty. He looked both directions. No one. The nearest intersection stretched almost 200 feet away. There wasn't enough time for anyone to disappear. He walked across the street anyway. Nothing. Only damp pavement reflecting the pale morning sky. An elderly woman walking her dog smiled politely as she passed. Michael stopped her. Did you see the man standing here? She looked around. What man? The one in the gray coat. She frowned. I've been walking this route every morning for 12 years. There wasn't anyone. Michael apologized. Perhaps he had imagined seeing someone through the rain-streaked glass. The explanation sounded reasonable. Until he returned upstairs. His coffee cup still rested beside the kitchen window. Beside it. A wet footprint. One footprint. Bare. As though someone with soaking wet feet had stood inside his apartment. The mark pointed toward the hallway. Not toward the window. Michael stared at it. He lived alone. No sign of forced entry. Every door remained locked. The footprint slowly dried before his eyes. Then disappeared completely. Leaving only polished wooden flooring behind. He crouched. Touched it. Dry. Nothing remained. His phone vibrated again. Not a call. A notification. No sender. No app. Only one sentence. 6 days left. The notification vanished before he could touch it. He searched every application. Nothing. No message. No alert history. He rubbed his eyes. Too little sleep. Too many night shifts. That had to be it. By evening Michael arrived at the emergency dispatch center. Rows of monitors filled the room. Operators answered dozens of calls every hour. Heart attacks. Car accidents. House fires. Domestic disputes. Real emergencies. Reality. Exactly what Michael needed. For several hours everything felt normal again. Routine returned. Voices. Reports. Coordinates. Police units. Ambulances. Then, shortly after midnight, his co-worker Lisa suddenly paused while walking past his desk. She looked toward the far corner of the operations room. "You expecting someone?" Michael followed her gaze. A little girl stood beside the vending machines. About 9 years old. Long dark hair. White sweater. Bare feet. She looked directly at Michael. He stood immediately. "Whose child is that?" Lisa turned back toward him. "What child?" Michael looked again. The girl remained exactly where she had been. Still watching. Still barefoot. She never blinked. Never moved. A police dispatcher nearby noticed Michael staring. "What are you looking at?" Michael pointed. "There." Everyone looked. Confused. The corner stood empty. Only the vending machines. Michael slowly lowered his hand. When he looked back, the little girl had gone. At 3:33 the following morning, exactly 24 hours after the first call, Michael's phone began ringing again. Michael watched the screen without touching the phone. The vibration echoed across the kitchen counter exactly as it had the previous night. 3:33 a.m. Unknown caller. The digital clock beside the microwave confirmed the time down to the second. He remembered the strange notification from earlier that day. 6 days left. If it had been real, then answering the call again would be the worst possible decision. The phone rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then it stopped. No voicemail. No missed call notification. Nothing. The screen returned to normal as though the phone had never rung. Michael released a slow breath. Perhaps the stories his exhausted mind had begun inventing would finally end. His apartment remained silent. Outside, fog drifted through the empty street beneath the orange glow of the streetlights. He locked the phone, finished his coffee, and drove toward the emergency dispatch center. During the entire drive he noticed something unusual. The roads felt almost deserted. Not because there were fewer cars. Because people weren't moving. A man stood beside a closed gas station. Completely still. A woman waited near a crosswalk without attempting to cross. An elderly man sat alone on a park bench despite the freezing morning air. Every one of them faced the road. Every one looked directly toward Michael's car. The moment he blinked, the woman disappeared. A block later, the old man was gone. Only the man at the gas station remained. Watching. Michael accelerated. By sunrise he convinced himself he had imagined everything. Long shifts distorted perception. His supervisor had warned everyone about fatigue countless times. People heard phones ringing that weren't. Saw movement in empty hallways. Forgot conversations they had just finished. This had to be the same. Inside the dispatch center, life continued normally. Monitors displayed emergency maps. Operators exchanged quiet jokes while preparing coffee. The routine comforted him. Until Lisa walked toward his desk. She looked concerned. "You don't look like you slept." Michael forced a smile. "I didn't." She nodded sympathetically. "You've got those eyes." "What eyes?" "The ones everyone gets before taking mandatory leave." Michael laughed. "I'll survive." Lisa wasn't convinced. As she walked away, Michael noticed something behind her. Standing beside the emergency exit. The man in the gray coat. Exactly the same one from outside his apartment. Still motionless. Still watching. Michael stood so quickly his chair rolled backward. The movement attracted several coworkers. What happened? He pointed toward the exit. There. Everyone turned. Nothing. Only the closed emergency door. The gray-coated man had vanished. His supervisor approached. You okay? Michael hesitated. Yeah. Just thought I saw someone. The supervisor glanced toward the empty hallway. Take 5 minutes. You've been working too many nights. Michael nodded. He walked into the break room. The coffee machine hummed quietly. No one else occupied the room. He splashed cold water onto his face. When he looked into the mirror, someone stood behind him. Not the man. The little girl. Bare feet. White sweater. Long dark hair hanging over her shoulders. She wasn't looking at Michael. She stared at the mirror itself. As though she expected someone else to appear. Michael spun around. Nobody. The break room remained empty. He looked back into the mirror. The girl was gone. Instead, one sentence slowly appeared across the fogged glass. Not written. Forming by itself. Don't let them smile. Michael stumbled backward. The words faded almost instantly. A second later Lisa entered carrying a soda. She looked toward him. You okay? Michael pointed at the mirror. Did you see that? She frowned. See what? The writing. She looked at the perfectly clean mirror. There isn't anything there. Michael didn't answer. His pulse hammered inside his ears. His phone vibrated. Another notification. No sound. No sender. Just 3 words. 5 days left. Again it disappeared before he could touch it. By the end of his shift, exhaustion had become overwhelming. The morning fog had thickened when he arrived back at his apartment building. As he climbed the stairs, he noticed the elderly woman from downstairs struggling with several grocery bags. Mrs. Donnelly had lived in the building for years. Michael offered to help. She smiled gratefully. While carrying one of the bags, he casually asked whether she had seen anyone unusual around the building recently. Her smile disappeared. She thought for a long moment. Then quietly answered. No. Before stepping into her apartment, she hesitated. Although. Michael waited. My grandson used to talk about people standing outside. He was 7. He said they never moved. She forced a laugh. Children imagine strange things. What happened to him? Mrs. Donnelly looked down at the floor. He stopped talking about them. When? Her expression changed. I don't remember. She slowly closed her apartment door. For several seconds Michael stood alone in the hallway. Something about her answer felt incomplete. Like someone had erased the middle of the memory. Inside his apartment he locked every door. Closed every curtain. Turned on every light. The place finally felt safe. Until sunset. The first figure appeared across the street. The man in the gray coat. An hour later. A woman stood beside him. By midnight. There were 4. None of them moved. None of them blinked. They simply watched Michael's apartment in complete silence. At exactly 3:33 a.m., before the phone had a chance to ring. Every one of them smiled. The smiles appeared at the exact same moment. No warning. No movement. 1 second, the 4 silent figures stood motionless beneath the streetlights. The next. Their lips stretched into identical expressions. Not friendly. Not malicious. Perfectly synchronized. Michael felt every hair on his arm stand upright. He instinctively stepped away from the living room window. None of them followed him with their eyes. They didn't need to. It somehow felt as though they already knew exactly where he was inside the apartment. His phone began vibrating. 3:33 a.m. Unknown caller. Michael stared at it. The figures outside remained smiling. The phone continued ringing. He didn't answer. After 4 vibrations, it stopped. Silence returned. Then every person outside slowly lowered their smiles. At exactly the same speed. Like actors receiving the same invisible command. Michael pulled every curtain shut. He knew it wouldn't help. He wasn't hiding from people. He was hiding from something that already knew where he lived. He barely slept. Every small sound inside the apartment made him sit upright. The refrigerator compressor. The plumbing. The wind outside. Everything sounded different now. By morning he convinced himself to leave for work. Routine. People. Noise. Those things still felt real. As he stepped into the hallway, he froze. The apartment across from his own had stood empty for nearly 6 months. A large yellow notice from the property manager still hung on the door. Today. Someone stood inside the apartment. Watching through the peephole. Michael couldn't see a face. Only a single eye. Unblinking. He stared for nearly 10 seconds. The eye never moved. He approached slowly. Halfway across the hallway. The apartment door suddenly swung open. The room inside was completely empty. Dust covered the floor. Furniture was wrapped in white sheets. No footprints. No sign anyone had been there. The peephole was dark. Michael looked back toward his own apartment. His front door stood exactly where he'd left it. Closed. Locked. Yet. Someone knocked from inside. 3 slow knocks. Michael's blood ran cold. He unlocked the door immediately. The apartment was empty. Every room. Every closet. Every window still locked from within. Nothing. His phone vibrated again. 4 days left. The message disappeared before he could touch it. During the drive to work, Michael avoided looking at pedestrians. It didn't matter. He noticed them anyway. A construction worker standing beside an unfinished building. Motionless. A teenager sitting on a bicycle without moving. A woman holding an umbrella although the sky was perfectly clear. Each time Michael looked into the rearview mirror. One of them had disappeared. Another had appeared somewhere ahead. Always closer. At the dispatch center, he decided to say nothing. He no longer trusted his own senses. He answered emergency calls for nearly 3 hours without incident. Heart attacks. Traffic collisions. A missing dog. Reality. Ordinary reality. Then a call appeared on his console. No caller ID. No GPS coordinates. No emergency routing code. Impossible. Every emergency call automatically displayed a location. Michael accepted it. Silence. His heart immediately began pounding. He knew this silence. The same enormous empty space. Then. Someone breathed. Very softly. A man's voice whispered. How many can you see today? The line disconnected. Duration. 007. Michael immediately searched the call log. Nothing. The connection didn't exist. Lisa noticed his expression. You look like you've seen a ghost. Michael almost laughed. Instead, he quietly asked. Has anyone ever called here without appearing in the system? Lisa frowned. Never. It can't happen. He nodded slowly. I thought so. That afternoon, his supervisor called him into the office. Michael expected questions about fatigue. Instead, the supervisor placed a printed incident report on the desk. Did you leave your station around noon? Michael shook his head. No. The supervisor turned the paper around. Security camera stills. Time stamp. 12:04 p.m. Michael sat at his desk answering calls. At exactly the same moment. Another Michael walked down the hallway toward the emergency exit. Wearing the same clothes. Same shoes. Same ID badge. Same face. Michael stared silently. That's impossible. The supervisor looked uncomfortable. The camera must have glitched. It merged recordings. It happens. Michael looked closer. The second version of himself wasn't walking normally. Every employee around him appeared blurred by motion. The other Michael remained perfectly sharp. Perfectly still. Even though one foot floated slightly above the floor. As if he wasn't walking. Just appearing in different places. The final camera frame showed the second Michael stopping beside the emergency exit. He slowly turned toward the camera. And smiled. Not Michael's smile. The same smile worn by every silent figure outside his apartment. The supervisor quickly removed the photographs. I'm deleting these. They'll only confuse people. Michael left the office without another word. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. That evening, before heading home, he stopped at a convenience store. The cashier greeted him politely. As Michael paid for bottled water, the cashier suddenly asked. Is your brother waiting outside? Michael frowned. I don't have a brother. The cashier pointed toward the parking lot. Standing beside Michael's car was another Michael. Identical in every detail. He stood perfectly still. Watching the store. The cashier looked back toward the register. There. He blinked. His smile faded. That's strange. What? There isn't anyone there. Michael slowly turned back toward the window. The parking space beside his car was empty. When he reached home that night, there were no longer 4 figures outside. There were 11. And this time, every one of them had his face. 11 faces. 11 versions of Michael Harris stood outside his apartment. Every one of them wore the same dark jacket. The same jeans. The same worn sneakers. Even the scar beneath his chin, left from a bicycle accident when he was 12, appeared on every face. None of them blinked. None of them breathed. They simply stood beneath the streetlights, perfectly spaced along both sides of the street. Watching. Michael stepped away from the window so quickly he knocked over a lamp. The crash echoed through the apartment. Outside. Nothing reacted. The figures didn't flinch. Didn't turn. Didn't even acknowledge the sound. His phone vibrated. No notification. No call. Instead, the screen turned black. Letters slowly appeared across the display. Day 4. The words dissolved. Another sentence replaced them. They are learning your face. Then the phone restarted by itself. Normal wallpaper. Normal applications. Nothing unusual. Michael threw the device onto the couch as though it had burned him. He spent the rest of the night sitting against the living room wall with every light turned on. At sunrise, courage finally returned. The street outside was empty. Not a single person remained. Only damp pavement and yesterday's newspapers blowing along the sidewalk. He hurried downstairs. Nothing. No footprints. No tire marks. No evidence anyone had spent the night outside. Across the street, Mrs. Donnelly watered flowers on her balcony. She smiled warmly. You're up early. Michael forced himself to sound calm. Did you happen to see people outside last night? She looked confused. What people? There were. He stopped. There were several. She laughed softly. The only thing outside was that orange cat that keeps stealing my birdseed. Michael nodded politely. He didn't mention the 11 copies of himself. No one would believe him. He barely believed himself. During the drive to work, he deliberately avoided mirrors. The rearview mirror. Store windows. Even reflective office buildings. Every reflection now made his stomach tighten. At the dispatch center, everything appeared normal. Too normal. People joked. Coffee brewed. Phones rang. Reality continued without waiting for Michael's fear. Until 10:14 a.m. An emergency call appeared. A frightened woman reported a man standing outside her house since midnight. He hasn't moved. Michael immediately felt cold. The address was only 3 miles from his apartment. Police were dispatched. 20 minutes later the officers radioed back. No suspicious person found. The caller insisted the man had remained there until police arrived. Then vanished. The officers quietly suggested stress or exhaustion. Michael closed the incident. His hands were shaking. At lunch, Lisa noticed. "You really need a vacation." Michael almost told her everything. The phone call. The silent people. The copies. Instead he asked something else. If someone kept seeing the same stranger, would you believe them? Lisa thought for a moment. It depends. On what? Whether the stranger ever did anything. Michael frowned. What do you mean? If someone just stands there. Maybe they're only waiting. The sentence lingered in Michael's mind. Waiting. Not hunting. Not attacking. Just waiting. That afternoon another emergency call arrived. A teenage boy. Terrified. His voice cracked as he spoke. There are people outside. Michael's heart skipped. How many? I don't know. They keep smiling. Michael sat upright. Can you describe them? They all look. The boy stopped breathing for a moment. Like me. The lines suddenly filled with static. Michael shouted into the headset. Stay on the phone. No answer. Only silence. Then the familiar voice. The one from the very first call. It quietly whispered. He's 1 day ahead of you. The connection died. This time the call remained in the system. Location. Caller ID. Everything. Police arrived at the address within 6 minutes. The house stood empty. No teenager. No parents. Neighbors claimed nobody had lived there for almost 2 years. Michael requested security footage from nearby businesses. One camera overlooked the front yard. The recording showed exactly what the neighbors described. An empty house. No lights. No movement. Then, at precisely 3:33 a.m., 23 identical figures walked into the yard. Every one of them had the same face. They formed a perfect circle around the house. They never entered. Never moved again. At sunrise. They disappeared simultaneously. The timestamp reached 3:33 p.m. Michael paused the footage. Something caught his attention. One upstairs window reflected the street. Inside that reflection, someone stood in the bedroom, watching the figures below. He enlarged the frame. His breath stopped. The person in the reflection was him. Not one of the copies. The real Michael. Wearing the clothes he had on today. The footage had been recorded yesterday. Someone knocked gently on the dispatch center window beside his desk. Michael looked up. Outside, across the parking lot, a 12th Michael stood perfectly still. Unlike the others. This one slowly raised a hand. And beckoned him to come outside. Michael didn't move. The 12th version of himself stood perfectly still in the dispatch center parking lot, one hand raised as though inviting him outside. Unlike the others, this one wasn't smiling. His expression was calm. Patient. Almost sympathetic. For several long seconds neither version of Michael moved. Then someone walked between them. A paramedic carrying 2 coffee cups crossed the parking lot without hesitation. He passed directly through the place where the other Michael was standing. There was no reaction. No collision. No pause. When the paramedic reached his ambulance, the figure remained exactly where it had been. Untouched. As though it existed in a different layer of reality. Michael looked around the operations room. No one else seemed to notice. Lisa continued typing reports. 2 police dispatchers argued over a misrouted call. His supervisor walked toward the conference room carrying paperwork. Life continued exactly as it should. Only Michael stood frozen. When he looked back outside, the figure had lowered its hand. It slowly pointed toward the road beyond the parking lot. Then disappeared. Not by walking away. Not by fading. One frame he existed. The next. Empty asphalt. Michael suddenly realized something. Every figure he had seen vanished the instant he looked away. Not before. Not after. Only during the brief moment his attention shifted elsewhere. It was as though they refused to let him witness their disappearance. That thought stayed with him throughout the rest of his shift. By the time he drove home, rain had returned. Heavy drops struck the windshield while the wipers struggled to keep the glass clear. Traffic moved slowly through downtown Portland. Michael kept both hands tightly on the steering wheel. No mirrors. No reflections. Just the road. At a red light he glanced toward the sidewalk. A little boy stood beneath a bus shelter. Around 8 years old. Blue raincoat. No umbrella. He wasn't looking at traffic. He stared directly at Michael's windshield. The light turned green. Cars behind him honked. Michael drove forward. After 20 yards he checked the mirror without thinking. The bus shelter was empty. His heart sank. He had done it again. He had looked away. Half an hour later he reached his apartment building. The parking lot felt strangely crowded. Not with cars. With people. Dozens of residents walked dogs, carried groceries, or talked beneath the awnings. Everything appeared normal. For the first time in days, relief washed over him. Maybe whatever had begun 4 nights ago was ending. Maybe exhaustion truly had been the cause. He unlocked the apartment door. Silence greeted him. The air smelled faintly of coffee from the morning. Nothing appeared disturbed. He checked every room. Bathroom. Bedroom. Closets. Windows. Everything remained exactly where he had left it. Then he noticed the answering machine. A blinking red light. 3 unheard messages. Michael frowned. He almost never received voicemail. Curious, he pressed play. Message 1. Static. Nothing else. Message 2. 3 seconds of silence. Then. His own voice. Calm. Steady. Don't answer tomorrow. The message ended. Michael stared at the machine. It was unmistakably his voice. Not similar. Identical. He played it again. Every tiny pause. Every breath. Every inflection belonged to him. Yet he had never recorded it. With trembling fingers, he pressed play once more. Message 3. This time there was no static. Only breathing. Slow. Measured. Then the same familiar voice quietly whispered. You already did. Click. End of recording. Michael unplugged the answering machine from the wall. The red light continued blinking. Impossible. He pulled the batteries from inside. Still blinking. Only after he carried it into the bathroom and shut the cabinet door did the light finally stop. Or perhaps. He simply couldn't see it anymore. He wasn't sure. That night sleep refused to come. Instead, Michael opened his laptop. If anyone else had experienced the same thing, there had to be evidence somewhere online. He searched dozens of phrases. Unknown caller says your name. People standing outside at night. Seeing copies of yourself. Most results led to mental health forums or urban legends. Then one search returned something different. A forgotten internet archive. Last updated in 2011. The title read. The 333 Project. The website looked ancient. Gray background. Broken images. Dead links. Almost every page had vanished. Only one discussion thread remained accessible. It contained 27 posts. The first dated back to 1998. The final one. 3 years ago. Every author described nearly identical experiences. An unknown call at 3:33 a.m. Someone speaking only their name. Silent people. Copies of themselves. Disappearing witnesses. The posts became increasingly desperate. One user wrote. Day 1. I thought someone was watching my house. Another. Day 3. My wife can't see them. Another. Day 4. They started looking like me. Michael's pulse quickened. He continued reading. Day 5. They began moving whenever I blinked. His breathing slowed. Today was day 5. He scrolled further. The 6th day entry consisted of only one sentence. Don't trust your memories. No explanation followed. The 7th day post didn't exist. Instead, the account had been deleted. Every other user ended the same way. Post stopped after day 6. No conclusions. No updates. No survivors. At the bottom of the page someone had left one final comment only 6 months earlier. The username read simply. Caller 333. There was no profile picture. No registration date. Only one message. The voice never chooses randomly. Michael tried clicking the username. Error. He refreshed the page. The website disappeared. 404, page not found. His browser history showed no record of ever visiting it. The address no longer existed. He leaned back in his chair, trying to convince himself he had imagined the entire thing. Then his laptop camera indicator switched on. The tiny green light glowed steadily. Michael hadn't opened any video application. Slowly, the camera activated by itself. His own face appeared on the screen. Tired. Pale. Eyes ringed with exhaustion. Then another face entered the frame. Standing directly behind him. Another Michael. Perfectly identical. Only smiling. Michael spun around. Nothing. The apartment stood empty. He looked back at the laptop. The smiling copy remained. It wasn't copying his movements. It wasn't even looking at the camera. It was looking directly at Michael. Then, very slowly, the copy raised one finger. Placed it across its lips. And silently mouthed 2 words. He's coming. The laptop screen instantly went black. At that exact moment, every light in the apartment went out. Outside, the entire neighborhood remained brightly illuminated. Only Michael's apartment had lost power. In the darkness, something knocked gently on the bedroom door. 3 slow knocks. The bedroom was empty. Michael had never left the living room. Then came 3 more knocks. This time, from inside the bedroom. The 3rd knock echoed through the apartment. Not loud. Not violent. Just 3 calm, deliberate taps from inside the bedroom. Michael remained frozen in the living room. Every light in the apartment had gone out at exactly the same moment. Outside, however, the neighborhood was brightly lit. Street lamps glowed through the curtains, headlights passed below, televisions flickered inside neighboring apartments. Only his home had fallen into darkness. His breathing sounded unnaturally loud. The bedroom door stood halfway down the narrow hallway. Closed. He had left it open less than an hour earlier. Another 3 knocks. This time slower. Each one separated by several seconds. Someone wanted him to count them. Michael reached into his pocket for his phone. No signal. No service. No Wi-Fi. Even the emergency call icon had disappeared. Only the time remained. 3:33. The seconds didn't move. The clock was frozen. A cold sensation spread through his chest. The apartment no longer felt like his apartment. The familiar walls seemed farther apart. The hallway looked longer than it had ever been. The bedroom door appeared almost impossibly distant. Michael grabbed the flashlight he kept in the kitchen drawer. It flickered twice before producing a weak beam. Enough to illuminate the hallway. Enough to reveal wet footprints. Bare feet. Exactly like the footprint he had seen days earlier. Except now there wasn't one. There were dozens. They began beneath the bedroom door. Crossed the hallway. Entered the living room. Circled around the couch where Michael had been sitting. Then returned to the bedroom. As though someone had quietly walked around him while he searched the internet. His stomach tightened. He hadn't heard a single step. The silence broke again. Knock. 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 Michael swallowed. Every instinct told him not to open that door. Yet another thought kept repeating inside his head. If someone is really inside. He slowly walked forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. The flashlight beam trembled with his hands. 10 feet. 8. 5. He stopped directly outside the bedroom. Silence. No breathing. No movement. Only the distant hum of traffic outside. Michael reached for the doorknob. The metal felt warm. Almost human. He twisted it slowly. The bedroom door opened. Empty. The bed remained perfectly made. The closet stood closed. The window locked. No footprints. No person. Nothing. Michael released a long breath. Then he noticed something impossible. The digital alarm clock beside his bed displayed 3:33. The battery-powered clock. His wristwatch. His phone. Every clock inside the room showed exactly the same frozen time. He backed away. The flashlight suddenly illuminated something on the bedroom wall. A photograph. Michael frowned. He had never hung photographs in his bedroom. He lived alone. There had never been any decoration there. Slowly he approached. The picture frame looked old. Black wood. Cracked glass. Inside. A family portrait. A father. A mother. A little girl. They smiled warmly toward the camera. Michael didn't recognize any of them. Until he looked closer. The father had his face. Not similar. His exact face. The woman wasn't familiar. Neither was the child. Yet beneath the picture someone had carefully written in elegant handwriting. The Harris family. October 18, 1997. Michael had been 5 years old. His parents had divorced before that. They had never owned a house like the one in the picture. He had never seen the woman. Never seen the little girl. Yet somehow, the photograph felt real. Like a forgotten memory. He removed it from the wall. The drywall behind it looked untouched. No nail hole. No screw. Nothing. It was as though the picture had always belonged there. The instant Michael turned it over, something fell from the back of the frame. A folded newspaper clipping. Yellow with age. He unfolded it carefully. The headline read, "Local 911 dispatcher missing for 6 days." The article continued. Michael Harris, age 34, disappeared from his Portland apartment last Tuesday after failing to report for work. Police found no signs of forced entry. Friends described unusual behavior during the week leading to his disappearance. His hands began shaking. The publication date was next Tuesday. 7 days in the future. He read further. Neighbors reported seeing Michael speaking to someone outside his apartment shortly before midnight, although security cameras showed he had been standing alone. Authorities recovered his phone inside the apartment. The final incoming call occurred at exactly 3:33 a.m. Michael dropped the newspaper. His breathing became uneven. No. Impossible. The article hadn't merely predicted his disappearance. It described details that hadn't happened yet. Someone knocked on the apartment door. Not the bedroom. The front door. 3 slow knocks. Michael stared toward the entrance. Who could possibly visit at nearly 4 in the morning? The knocking came again. This time accompanied by a familiar voice. Lisa. She sounded frightened. Michael. I know you're inside. He hurried through the apartment. Relief flooded him. Finally. A real person. He reached the front door and looked through the peephole. Lisa stood outside. Still wearing yesterday's work clothes. Rain soaked her hair. She looked terrified. Michael unlocked the first lock. Then the second. Just before opening the door, he remembered something. The article. Security cameras showed he had been standing alone. His hand stopped. Very slowly. He looked through the peephole again. Lisa hadn't moved. But something behind her had. Standing at the end of the hallway outside the apartment building were 23 identical Michaels. Every one of them smiling. Every one of them staring directly at Lisa. Not one of them looked at the apartment door. They were watching her. Waiting. Lisa knocked again. Harder this time. Please. Don't make me stay out here. Michael's heart pounded. He almost opened the door. Then he noticed one tiny detail. Lisa never blinked. Not once. The hallway lights flickered. For the briefest fraction of a second. Every smiling copy vanished. Only Lisa remained. Then the lights flickered again. The copies returned. Except now. They had moved. They were no longer standing at the end of the hallway. They stood only a few feet behind her. Still smiling. Still silent. Lisa slowly tilted her head. Her voice became strangely calm. Almost identical to the voice from the phone. You looked through the peephole. Didn't you? Michael stepped backward. The smile spreading across Lisa's face wasn't hers. It was the same smile worn by every copy he had ever seen. Then all 23 Michaels spoke at exactly the same time. In perfect unison. We know you can see us now. Michael stumbled backward until his shoulders struck the living room wall. Outside his apartment door, 23 identical versions of himself stood silently behind Lisa. Their smiles never changed. Their eyes never wandered. Every face carried the same impossible calm, as though they had already witnessed everything that was about to happen. Lisa remained in front of the door. Her breathing sounded natural. Rainwater dripped from her jacket onto the hallway carpet. She looked frightened. Yet something about her no longer felt real. She hadn't blinked in nearly a minute. Michael slowly stepped toward the peephole again. The copies remained behind her. This time there were 24. One more than before. The newest copy stood directly beside the elevator. Unlike the others, it wasn't smiling. It stared straight into the peephole. Straight at Michael. Then it quietly shook its head. Once. A warning. Michael froze. The smiling copies never moved. The silent one had. Lisa knocked again. Not loudly. Almost gently. Michael. You've been gone for 3 days. His stomach tightened. 3 days. He looked at the frozen clock beside the couch. Still 3:33. He grabbed his phone. The display had changed. Saturday. Impossible. Yesterday had been Wednesday. His call history had disappeared completely. Photos were missing. Messages had vanished. Even the wallpaper had changed. Instead of the lighthouse on the Maine coast, the screen showed a picture of his apartment building. Taken from across the street. From the exact spot where the gray-coated man had first stood. His breathing became uneven. Had he somehow lost 3 days? Or had someone changed his phone? Another knock. Lisa's voice became softer. Please. I'm scared. Michael wanted to believe it was really her. He reached toward the lock. The silent copy suddenly looked directly into his eyes. Again it slowly shook its head. Then. It raised one finger. Not to its lips. Toward the ceiling. Michael frowned. Above. He slowly looked upward. The apartment ceiling was perfectly ordinary. White paint. Smoke detector. A small crack running toward the hallway. Then. A drop of water landed on his forehead. He touched it. Not water. Blood. Another drop. Then another. Michael aimed the flashlight upward. The crack in the ceiling had widened. Something dark slowly spread beneath the paint. Not leaking. Moving. Like hundreds of tiny veins crawling through the plaster. The apartment lights suddenly returned. Every bulb illuminated at once. The blood vanished. The ceiling looked normal again. Michael hurried back to the peephole. The hallway stood empty. Lisa had disappeared. So had every copy. Only silence remained. His phone vibrated. A new notification appeared. Unlike the others, this one didn't vanish. It remained on the screen. Memory recovery complete. Below it. A video file. No sender. No date. Only one title. Watch alone. Against every instinct, Michael opened it. The recording began with security camera footage. His apartment building. Timestamp. 3 days earlier. The front entrance opened. Michael walked inside. Nothing unusual. He carried groceries. Checked his mailbox. Entered the elevator. The footage switched to another camera. 4th floor hallway. Michael exited the elevator. Walked toward his apartment. Stopped halfway. Turned toward the empty hallway. Smiled. Not his normal smile. The same smile. Then. He began speaking to someone standing directly in front of him. The camera recorded no audio. Only movements. Michael laughed. Nodded. Reached out. As though shaking someone's hand. Then. He unlocked his apartment. Held the door open. Waited. Someone invisible entered first. Only afterward did Michael step inside. The apartment door closed. The recording ended. Michael replayed it. Again. And again. There was nobody in the hallway. Yet his own behavior left no doubt. He had seen someone. Someone the camera couldn't capture. His phone vibrated once more. A text message. No number. No sender. Only one sentence. You invited him inside. Michael felt the room begin spinning. No. He couldn't remember doing any of that. The smiling. The conversation. Opening the door. Nothing. He searched desperately through his memories. Wednesday night. Driving home. Rain. Coffee. The website about 3:33. Then. Nothing. 3 entire days existed only as scattered fragments. Tiny flashes. Walking through unfamiliar streets. Standing in front of mirrors. Someone laughing behind him. A train whistle. The smell of seawater. Each memory vanished before he could grasp it. His breathing became shallow. He was forgetting. Or. Someone was taking pieces away. A loud crash exploded from the bedroom. Michael sprinted down the hallway. The framed photograph of the Harris family lay shattered across the floor. Glass covered the carpet. The picture itself remained untouched. Except. The little girl had disappeared. Only the father and mother remained. Michael picked up the photograph. On the back, new handwriting had appeared. She remembered first. The bedroom suddenly felt much colder. His flashlight rolled beneath the bed. When he bent to retrieve it, he noticed another object hidden in the darkness. A small cassette recorder. Old. Yellowed with age. The battery should have been dead decades ago. Yet the red recording light was still blinking. Rec. Michael slowly pressed stop. The display read. Recording time, 72 hours 18 minutes and 41 seconds. 72 hours. Exactly 3 days. His missing 3 days. With trembling hands, he pressed play. Static filled the room. Then. His own voice. Weak. Exhausted. If anyone finds this. Don't trust me. Several seconds of silence followed. Then his recorded voice continued. I've already started confusing them. Another pause. Heavy breathing. I don't know which Michael I am anymore. Michael's blood turned cold. The recording continued. If you're hearing this, it means I failed. Then. A second voice interrupted. Not from the room. From the recording. The familiar caller. The one who had spoken his name 4 nights ago. Only this time. The voice laughed. Quietly. Patiently. And whispered. He's finally asking the right question. The cassette clicked. End of tape. At that exact moment. Someone knocked once. Not at the apartment door. Not at the bedroom. From inside the bedroom closet. One slow, deliberate knock. Michael stared at the closet door. The single knock still echoed inside the bedroom. Not loud. Not violent. Measured. Almost polite. The cassette recorder remained in his trembling hands, its tape finished, the tiny reels no longer turning. For several seconds nothing happened. Then. Another knock. Exactly the same rhythm. One knock. Silence. One knock. Silence. As though whoever stood inside wanted to make absolutely certain Michael knew where to look. He slowly backed toward the bedroom door. Every instinct screamed not to open the closet. He had ignored those instincts before. Every time he did, the nightmare grew worse. His flashlight suddenly flickered. Not because the batteries were dying. Because something moved through the beam. A shadow crossed the bedroom wall. Too tall to belong to Michael. Too thin to belong to anyone alive. It disappeared before the flashlight stabilized. Michael spun around. The room remained empty. His breathing became louder. The closet door creaked open by itself. Only an inch. Just enough to reveal darkness. Cold air poured into the bedroom. Not ordinary cold. The kind that carried no smell. No humidity. No feeling of movement. It simply erased warmth wherever it touched. Michael took another step backward. The cassette recorder slipped from his hands and struck the floor. Instead of breaking, it started playing again. Without anyone touching it. His own recorded voice returned. Only now it sounded different. More exhausted. As if the person speaking hadn't slept in weeks. I didn't understand at first. I thought they were copies. They aren't. A long pause followed. Static crackled softly. They're possibilities. Michael frowned. The recording continued. Every choice you never made. Every version of yourself that answered. Every version that opened the door. His heartbeat quickened. No. That wasn't possible. Another pause. They keep multiplying because you keep remembering them. Michael's mouth went dry. Remembering. Not creating. The tape hissed again. Then the voice whispered something that made Michael's knees weaken. There was never only one call. The recording stopped. Silence returned. His phone vibrated. This time the screen displayed something entirely new. Not a message. Not a notification. A list. Hundreds of timestamps. Every single one read. 3:33 a.m. The date stretched backward for years. 2026. 2027. 2028. 2029. 2030. On and on. Every October. Every March. Sometimes twice in the same month. There were dozens of missed calls. No. Hundreds. Michael had no memory of receiving any of them. His breathing became uneven. He opened the oldest entry. The recording began instantly. A child's voice answered. Hello. Silence. Then the familiar caller. It softly spoke one name. Michael. The child laughed. I'm not Michael. The line disconnected. Michael stared at the screen. That recording couldn't exist. He had never owned this phone as a child. His fingers trembled as he opened another recording. This one sounded older. Teenage Michael. Background noise from a school hallway. Again. The voice spoke only his name. Another recording. College dormitory. Another. Hospital waiting room. Another. His first apartment. Every stage of his life. Every few years. Always at exactly 3:33. Always the same voice. Always his name. Michael suddenly understood. The first call. Had never been the first. He simply couldn't remember the others. The apartment lights flickered. The closet door slowly opened wider. The darkness inside looked wrong. Not because it was black. Because it seemed deeper than the closet itself. Far deeper. Michael knew the closet measured barely 3 feet. Yet the flashlight beam disappeared without reaching the back wall. His phone vibrated again. This message remained. Day 6. Memory is almost complete. Outside the apartment came another sound. Not footsteps. Applause. Slow. Rhythmic. Hundreds of hands clapping together. Michael rushed toward the living room window. The street below was filled. Not with dozens. Not with hundreds. Thousands. Every sidewalk. Every parked car. Every rooftop. Every balcony. People stood absolutely motionless. Young. Old. Children. Police officers. Doctors. Construction workers. Businessmen. Every possible version of ordinary life. Yet every face was Michael's. Thousands of identical eyes stared upward toward his apartment. No one blinked. No one moved. The applause stopped all at once. Silence covered the city. Then every copy slowly raised one arm. Pointing toward Michael's building. Toward the 4th floor. Toward him. His phone rang. For the first time. There was no unknown caller. The screen displayed a name. Michael Harris. He answered before thinking. Breathing. Then. His own voice. Not recorded. Alive. If you're hearing this. I'm still outside. Michael froze. What? You opened the wrong door. His own voice sounded terrified. I never got back inside. The line filled with static. Then returned. Whatever is in your apartment isn't your home anymore. Michael turned slowly. The bedroom hallway had changed. It was longer. Much longer. The bedroom door could barely be seen in the distance. The closet still stood open. Something was standing inside it now. Only its silhouette. Too tall. Too thin. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. It took one slow step forward. The apartment floor didn't creak. Instead, Michael heard a telephone ringing. Very close. He looked down. An old rotary phone sat in the middle of his living room. It had never been there before. The phone rang once. Twice. 3 times. Michael already knew what would happen. At exactly 3:33 a.m., on the 7th day. The call would be answered. Whether he picked up the receiver. Or not. The ringing stopped. Not because anyone answered. Because whoever had been calling no longer needed the telephone. The apartment became so quiet that Michael could hear the faint hum of electricity inside the walls. The old rotary phone sat in the middle of the living room. Black. Dust-covered. Its twisted cord stretched across the floor toward nothing. There wasn't even a wall jack nearby. It simply existed. The receiver rested perfectly in place. Michael stared at it for nearly a minute. His rational mind searched desperately for an explanation. Someone was playing an elaborate prank. He was hallucinating from exhaustion. Carbon monoxide. A neurological disorder. Anything. Anything except what the last 6 days had shown him. His eyes drifted toward the hallway. The silhouette still stood inside the bedroom closet. It hadn't moved. Yet it somehow looked closer. Not because it had taken another step. Because the hallway itself had become shorter. Michael suddenly realized something horrifying. The apartment wasn't changing. His perception of space was. Every room felt wrong. The kitchen seemed farther away than usual. The living room ceiling looked higher. The hallway breathed. Expanded. Contracted. Like the inside of a sleeping creature. His phone vibrated once. No message. Instead, the battery percentage began counting backward. Not draining. Reversing. 81%. 82%. 83%. The numbers climbed until they reached 100%. Then continued. 101%. 102%. Michael dropped the phone. The screen cracked. Yet the impossible numbers kept increasing beneath the broken glass. 112. 120. 140. The display finally went completely white. Then black. Dead. Not powered off. Dead. The apartment lights dimmed again. The silhouette stepped out of the closet. For the first time Michael saw more than its outline. It wore a dark overcoat. The same gray coat from the man across the street. Its arms hung unnaturally long. Its hands disappeared into the sleeves. No face. Only darkness where features should have been. Yet Michael could feel it watching him. Not with eyes. With recognition. The figure tilted its head slightly. Exactly the way Lisa had done outside the apartment. Then it quietly raised one hand. Not toward Michael. Toward the rotary phone. The receiver slowly lifted by itself. No invisible strings. No mechanical movement. It simply floated upward. Michael heard breathing through the speaker. Not one person. Many. Hundreds. Layered together. Every breath slightly out of rhythm. Then. Every voice whispered at once. Michael. The apartment shook violently. Books fell from shelves. Kitchen cabinets burst open. Plates crashed onto the floor. The windows trembled so hard Michael expected them to shatter. Instead. Everything stopped. Silence. The receiver gently lowered itself back into place. The figure remained motionless. Michael realized his heart was racing so hard it hurt. He forced himself to breathe. One slow inhale. One slow exhale. Think. There had to be a pattern. The voices always called his name. The figures never attacked. They watched. Waited. Smiled. The website. The cassette. The future newspaper. Everything pointed toward one thing. The seventh day wasn't about dying. It was about choosing. Choosing what? His eyes landed on the cassette recorder lying near the bedroom door. The tape inside had reached its end. Michael picked it up. As he turned it over, something rattled inside. He removed the battery cover. Instead of batteries, there was a folded photograph. Impossible. It hadn't been there before. The picture showed Michael standing inside his apartment. Only. The apartment looked older. Wallpaper instead of painted walls. Different furniture. The rotary phone sat on a small wooden table beside the window. The calendar hanging in the kitchen displayed. October 1994. Michael would have been 2 years old. He turned the photograph over. Written carefully on the back were 8 words. This wasn't the first apartment you disappeared from. His blood ran cold. Another memory flashed before his eyes. Not a dream. Not imagination. A hallway. His mother's voice screaming his name. Police officers. Flashlights. A crowded apartment building. Someone saying. We found him. Then darkness. Michael stumbled backward. His mother had once told him he wandered away as a toddler. She said a neighbor found him sleeping in the laundry room. Had that story been true? Or had she changed it? The rotary phone rang again. Once. Twice. 3 times. Michael didn't move. The ringing continued. 4. 5. 6. It had never rung more than 3 times before. On the 7th ring. It stopped. The receiver lifted by itself. No voices came this time. Instead. Michael heard his own breathing. His own footsteps. His own heartbeat. Someone was listening through the other end. Listening to him. Then a terrified voice whispered. Not the calm version from before. A frightened version. His own voice. Please. If you can still hear me. Don't let him see your face. The line crackled violently. A deep sound echoed through the apartment. Not laughter. Not speech. Something older. The silhouette slowly lifted its head. For the first time, Michael saw its face. Or rather, he saw the absence of one. Where eyes, nose and mouth should have been, there was only a perfect mirror. Michael instinctively looked into it. Instead of his reflection, he saw himself answering the very first call. Not 6 days ago. 32 years earlier. As a little boy. Standing beside a rotary telephone. Smiling. And saying, "Hello." Michael jerked his head away from the mirror-like face. His pulse thundered in his ears. The image of the little boy standing beside the rotary telephone refused to disappear. It wasn't a memory in the ordinary sense. It felt like stepping into a room that had always existed somewhere inside his mind but had been locked for decades. He had been there. He had answered. The voice had called his name long before he could understand what his own name even meant. The apartment became unnaturally still. The figure in the gray overcoat lowered its head again. Its reflective face faded back into featureless darkness. It had shown Michael exactly what it wanted him to see. Not the future. Not another possibility. The beginning. Michael slowly backed away until he reached the kitchen counter. His breathing remained uneven. His thoughts, however, became strangely clear. Everything since the first night had revolved around memory. Not death. Not ghosts. Memory. The missing days. The disappearing messages. The photographs. The cassette recorder. The future newspaper. Every impossible event had one thing in common. Someone, or something, had been changing what Michael remembered. His eyes drifted toward the apartment window. Thousands of identical Michaels still stood outside. They hadn't moved. Rain continued falling through them. Cars occasionally passed along the street without slowing. Drivers seemed completely unaware that an entire city block was occupied by silent copies of one man. Michael noticed something new. None of the copies cast shadows. The streetlights illuminated the pavement beneath them, but no shadow stretched across the sidewalk. Almost unconsciously, he looked at his own feet. His shadow remained. The realization sent a strange feeling through him. The copies weren't people. They weren't bodies. They weren't hallucinations either. They were missing versions. Lives that had separated from his own. Every decision. Every forgotten memory. Every answer he might have given. Every Michael who had picked up the phone throughout the years. The voice hadn't created them. It had collected them. The rotary telephone rang again. 1 ring. Michael didn't flinch. 2. The gray-coated figure remained motionless. 3. The receiver lifted itself. This time Michael walked toward it. Slowly. Deliberately. He no longer cared whether answering was dangerous. The danger had begun decades ago. He stopped inches from the receiver. The breathing returned. Hundreds of layered breaths. Then silence. Michael spoke first. "Who are you?" "Nothing." He repeated the question. Still nothing. Finally. A different voice answered. Not the caller. Not his own. His mother's. Soft. Tired. The exact voice she had when she used to wake him for school. Michael. His knees weakened. His mother had died 4 years earlier. The voice continued. "I'm sorry." Static interrupted her. "I'm so." The connection crackled violently. "Sorry we couldn't keep you asleep." The line went dead. Michael stared at the receiver. His mother had never spoken those words. Or perhaps she had. Perhaps he simply couldn't remember. The apartment shook again. A loud crack split the ceiling. This time the plaster actually broke apart. Instead of insulation or wooden beams, Michael saw darkness. Not the darkness of an attic. Endless darkness. Like the ceiling no longer existed. Like something enormous waited above the apartment. The gray-coated figure looked upward. For the first time since it had appeared. It seemed nervous. The darkness above the ceiling slowly began filling with tiny lights. Thousands of them. Michael squinted. They weren't stars. They were telephone screens. Hundreds. No. Millions of glowing displays suspended in infinite blackness. Every screen showed the same thing. An incoming call. Unknown caller. 3:33 a.m. Every phone rang at exactly the same moment. The sound became unbearable. Michael covered his ears. It made no difference. The ringing wasn't entering through sound. It came from inside his head. Fragments of forgotten memories burst forward. He saw himself at 6 years old answering a house phone while his parents argued in another room. At 12, picking up a payphone that had somehow started ringing after midnight. At 19, answering an unfamiliar cell phone found on a bus seat. At 26, waking inside a motel because the room telephone wouldn't stop ringing. Different places. Different years. Different phones. Always. 3:33. Always. The same voice saying only one word. His name. Michael staggered backward. He hadn't received one call. He had answered dozens. Maybe hundreds. Every time he forgot. Every time life continued as though nothing had happened. Until now. The 7th day. The voice had finally stopped erasing everything. It wanted him to remember. The ringing ceased instantly. Absolute silence returned. The gray-coated figure slowly extended one arm toward Michael. Its sleeve fell back. There was no hand. Only darkness. Inside that darkness floated countless tiny reflections. Michael looked closer. Faces. Thousands of faces. Children. Adults. Old men. Young women. Different races. Different countries. Every one of them stared outward with the same terrified expression. Every one whispered silently. Help. The figure wasn't holding them. They were trapped inside it. His phone suddenly turned back on by itself. The white screen displayed only one sentence. They all answered. Below it appeared another. Only one has ever remembered. Michael. The room began collapsing. Not exploding. Folding. The walls bent inward like paper. Furniture dissolved into floating dust. The apartment stretched into impossible angles before slowly peeling away. Within seconds there was no apartment. No building. No city. Michael stood alone on an endless black floor beneath the ocean of glowing telephones suspended overhead. The gray-coated figure stood 30 feet away. For the first time. It spoke. Not through the phone. Not inside his head. Directly. Its voice contained every voice Michael had ever heard. Every age. Every language. Every emotion. You remember. Michael couldn't answer. You always do. The figure took one slow step closer. The others never survived this far. Another step. They choose to forget. Another. You chose to look. Michael finally forced the question that had haunted him since the first night. What happens on the 7th day? The figure stopped. Its featureless face slowly tilted. Then. For the first time. It smiled. And somewhere in the endless darkness behind Michael. Another telephone began to ring. The ringing echoed across the endless darkness. One telephone. Then another. Then dozens. Within seconds, millions of unseen phones rang together, creating a sound so immense that it no longer resembled ringing at all. It became something alive, a vibration that passed through Michael's bones instead of his ears. Above him, the infinite sky of glowing screens slowly awakened. Every display showed the same incoming call. Unknown caller. 3:33 a.m. The gray-coated figure remained motionless. Its smile never widened. It didn't need to. It had already waited longer than Michael could imagine. You asked what happens on the 7th day. The voice no longer came from the figure. It came from everywhere. From the darkness beneath Michael's feet. From the telephones above. From the air itself. The seventh day is not the end. It is the day you remember the first answer. Michael closed his eyes. The memories no longer arrived as scattered fragments. They returned all at once. He was 2 years old. His parents were asleep. The old rotary telephone rang inside their apartment. 3 times. Little Michael climbed down from his bed. Barefoot. Curious. He answered. A calm voice softly spoke his name. Not Michael. Not exactly. It pronounced something older. Something that sounded almost like his name but wasn't. The child smiled. Because children smile at familiar voices. The voice asked one question. A question he had forgotten for 32 years. Will you remember me? Little Michael answered without hesitation. Yes. Everything dissolved. His mother found him hours later asleep inside the laundry room. She believed he had wandered there during the night. Doctors blamed sleepwalking. Police closed the report. Life continued. Except. It never truly had. Every few years the caller returned. Not to haunt him. To see whether he still remembered. Each time Michael answered. The memory disappeared again. Until the final cycle. This one. The figure slowly approached. Each step caused another 1,000 telephones above them to fall silent. You were never chosen because you were special. You were chosen because you answered. Michael finally understood. Every other trapped face inside the creature. Every terrified expression. Every silent pair of eyes. Belonged to someone who had answered the call. Some had forgotten forever. Others had remembered too late. What are you? The figure stopped only a few feet away. For the first time, its featureless face changed. The darkness receded. Beneath it appeared thousands of reflections. Not mirrors. Lives. Each reflection showed a different person standing beside a ringing telephone. Some answered. Some walked away. Some hesitated. Each choice created another reflection. Another possibility. Another memory. I am what remains. Of what? Every answer. Michael frowned. I don't understand. You think memory belongs to people. It doesn't. People belong to memory. The words settled into the silence. Somehow. They made sense. The creature wasn't feeding on lives. It wasn't killing anyone. It collected unfinished memories. The moments that should have ended differently. The choices left unresolved. The copies of Michael. They weren't clones. They were abandoned versions of himself. Lives that had split away every time he answered. All waiting to become whole again. The figure extended its hand. Darkness flowed from its sleeve like liquid smoke. You may leave. Michael looked up. Forgetting? The figure nodded. You will wake tomorrow. You will remember none of this. You will live. And them? He looked toward the countless faces drifting inside the darkness beneath the sleeve. The figure remained silent. Michael already knew the answer. They would remain. Forever. Unless. An impossible thought entered his mind. He looked toward the endless sky of ringing phones. Toward the millions of unanswered calls. Then back at the figure. What happens? If nobody ever answers again? For the first time. The smile disappeared. The silence that followed lasted several seconds. Then the figure quietly replied. No one has ever asked that. Michael understood. The caller possessed incredible power. It could erase memories. Create possibilities. Wait across decades. Yet one thing remained beyond its control. Choice. A call meant nothing if nobody answered. Michael slowly reached into his pocket. The cracked cell phone was still there. Its screen suddenly illuminated. Incoming call. Unknown caller. The answer button glowed green. The decline button glowed red. Michael stared at both. Then. Instead of touching either one. He powered the phone off. The screen went black. Instantly every telephone suspended across the endless darkness stopped ringing. Absolute silence. The gray-coated figure took one uncertain step backward. For the first time. It looked afraid. Michael removed the phone battery. Then crushed the SIM card beneath his shoe. The endless black floor trembled. One by one, the trapped faces inside the creature opened their eyes. Not in fear. In recognition. The reflections began separating from the darkness. Thousands. Millions. Like stars leaving a dying night sky. The figure reached toward them desperately. It caught nothing. Its body began breaking apart. Not into ash. Into forgotten moments. Old hallways. Broken telephones. Empty apartments. Rain-covered streets. Everything it had gathered across countless lives drifted away like pages carried by the wind. The smiling copies surrounding Michael appeared one final time. Every version looked at him. None smiled now. Instead, each quietly nodded. One after another they dissolved into light. The last to disappear was the silent Michael who had warned him outside the apartment. Before fading completely, he whispered only 2 words. "Thank you." Darkness vanished. Michael opened his eyes. Morning sunlight poured through his apartment window. Birds sang outside. Cars moved along the street below. His alarm clock displayed 7:18 a.m. Power worked. The furniture stood exactly where it belonged. No rotary telephone. No photographs. No cassette recorder. Only silence. His cell phone rested on the kitchen table. The battery lay beside it. The SIM card remained broken exactly as he remembered. Everything else could have been a dream. Weeks passed. Then months. Life slowly returned to normal. Michael eventually left the night shift. He found a quieter job teaching emergency communication procedures at the State Academy. He slept at night again. He smiled more often. The nightmares never returned. Years later, on an autumn evening, one of his students stayed after class. The young man looked embarrassed. "Can I ask you something strange?" Michael smiled. "Go ahead." The student hesitated. "My phone rang last night. It was exactly 3:33. It only said." The young man's face turned pale. Unknown caller. Michael's smile faded. He asked only one question. "Did you answer?" The student slowly shook his head. "No. It stopped after 3 rings." Michael looked out the classroom window. The sun was setting behind the trees. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he quietly smiled. "Good. Keep doing that." The student laughed awkwardly, never realizing how serious those words truly were. Years later, millions of people around the world would complain about mysterious calls that always came at 3:33 a.m. Most ignored them. Some answered. Most forgot. A very small number remembered. But somewhere, on a forgotten phone that no network had ever carried, one final missed call remained forever unanswered. Unknown caller. 3:33 a.m. Missed call.